To all cherished Heartland followers, the moment we have collectively held our breath for what seems like an age has arrived. Season 19, Episode 1, unveils the staggering, heart-stopping return of our beloved Ty Borden, a man we had all mourned and believed lost to us forever. While this miraculous reappearance brings with it an almost unimaginable surge of joy, it simultaneously compels Amy to confront a deeply painful and complicated reality concerning Nathan, the steadfast man who had been her anchor through the storm of her grief. This episode meticulously explores the agonizing decision Amy is forced to make, a choice that leads to a farewell that is as inevitable as it is profoundly sorrowful. The question, therefore, hangs heavy in the air. How will Amy navigate this truly impossible situation? How does one find the words to say goodbye to a man who offered such gentle solace and the hope of a new beginning, only to have her entire world, her very soul, completely and irrevocably realigned by the return of her one true soulmate? Prepare your tissues, because this installment is an emotional torrent, compelling Amy to face her cherished past, her turbulent present, and the undeniable cost of a love so powerful it cannot be denied. The season opens with a scene of deceptive serenity, a quiet, almost eerie stillness that often precedes an emotional hurricane. Amy is found in the familiar, hallowed sanctuary of the Heartland barn, tending to Spartan, a comforting ritual she frequently turns to when she needs to quiet the relentless turmoil in her thoughts and gently untangle the complex knots of her emotions. Her mind on this particular fateful morning was a chaotic whirlwind of images, a poignant and bittersweet tapestry woven from threads of past and present. Cherished yet achingly painful memories of Ty, his infectious laughter, his quiet strength, the vibrant dreams of the life they had so joyfully begun to build together, all of which had been so cruelly, inexplicably curtailed. These vivid, almost palpable recollections were increasingly, starkly juxtaposed with a growing, undeniable sense of emotional detachment from Nathan, the kind, dedicated, and steadfast veterinarian who had become a gentle, reassuring presence in her life, a quiet symbol of her courageous attempt to move forward from devastating loss. And as always, woven intricately through it all, like a golden thread, was her unwavering, fierce, and profound affection for Lindy, her precious daughter, the living, breathing embodiment of her, and Ty's enduring, unbreakable love. The barn, once a shining beacon of unbridled optimism in the vibrant, bustling hub of her incredible partnership with Ty, now seemed to resonate more deeply, more poignantly than ever with the melancholic, bittersweet echoes of the past. Each weathered beam and dancing shadow seemed saturated with his memory, with the ghost of his presence. As she groomed Spartan, her movements methodical, almost automatic. A familiar comfort in their repetition, a shadow flickered almost imperceptibly across the barn entrance. Initially, Amy, lost deep in her contemplative, sorrowful state, shrugged it off as merely a trick of the light, a common fleeting occurrence in the old beloved structure. But then, a voice she had replayed in her dreams 1,000 times, but never, ever imagined she would hear again outside the sacred sanctuary of those dreams. A voice that was an intrinsic, irreplaceable, fundamental part of her very soul uttered her name softly, hesitantly. Amy? She stopped dead, every nerve ending instantly igniting, her pulse quickening to a wild, panicked, thundering rhythm against her ribs as she turned, slowly, to face the individual she had yearned for with every breath, with every fiber of her being, yet never truly, deeply anticipated seeing again in this lifetime. Ty Borden. His features, though undeniably weathered and etched with lines of hardship she couldn't even begin to comprehend, were unmistakably, achingly, wonderfully his. His eyes, those familiar, kind eyes that had always possessed the uncanny, unnerving ability to see straight into the very depths of her soul, now carried the almost unbearable, crushing burden of the years they had been forced apart. A veritable universe of unimaginable suffering and profound, silent longing. For a fleeting yet utterly eternal moment, Amy was completely, utterly paralyzed, her mind struggling frantically, desperately to grasp what her heart, in an instant of pure, unadulterated shock and a wildly burgeoning, incredulous joy, intrinsically, immediately recognized. It's Ty. He's alive, and he's present here in their barn. The reunion was not an immediate cinematic rush of tearful embraces and joyful cries. The shock was too profound, too overwhelming for that. Disbelief, stark and absolute, held Amy captive, her feet seemingly rooted to the straw-covered floor as Ty took a hesitant, cautious step forward, his own movements tentative, almost fearful, as if he feared she might shatter into a million pieces, or that he himself was merely a figment of her profound, unyielding grief. "It's me," he murmured, his voice unsteady, thick with a maelstrom of emotions that had clearly been locked away, suppressed for years. "I'm here, Amy." Tears, hot and sudden, welled in Amy's eyes, blurring his beloved, unbelievable face. How is this even possible?" she whispered, her voice trembling, fragile as spun glass, barely audible. Ty then began to explain the almost inconceivable, harrowing truth. His supposed death, the news that had shattered her world, was the horrific result of a catastrophic misidentification following a devastating accident at a remote geological survey site he'd been volunteering at as a vet in a politically unstable region. While the world, and most importantly Amy, had mourned his tragic loss, he was, in reality, recovered by a small, international medical aid group operating in an extremely isolated mountain range. He'd sustained critical injuries, including a severe head trauma that resulted in a prolonged period of amnesia, and their mobile unit was then completely cut off from the outside world for months by a series of violent earthquakes and subsequent landslides that destroyed all routes and communication lines. He was alive, but lost to everyone, including himself for a time, fighting for his life and then fighting against seemingly insurmountable obstacles to find his way back. The narrative was both agonizing in its stark portrayal of his intense suffering and astounding in the sheer, improbable miracle of his survival and eventual return. As Amy absorbed the unbelievable, almost fantastical story, her mind reeling from the implications, a tiny, resilient spark of hope, long buried under layers of suffocating grief, pain, and weary resignation, began to rekindle deep within her, threatening to ignite into a consuming, altering blaze of renewed love. Could this truly be her Ty? The love of her life, her soulmate, returned to her from the very shadowlands of death itself? As the stunning, earth-shattering reality of Ty's reappearance began to truly permeate her consciousness, Amy's already turbulent emotions were thrown into an even greater, more complex maelstrom. Each glance at Ty, each rediscovered, familiar nuance of his expression, each subtle gesture unleashed a fresh torrent of memories. Recollections of their very first meeting, the awkwardness and the instant spark, their youthful dreams whispered under starry skies, their shared trials and hard-won triumphs, the profound, all-encompassing love that had defined her entire existence, and the beautiful family they had joyfully, hopefully started with the birth of their precious Lindy. A life so cruelly, so inexplicably, so devastatingly snatched away from them. However, life, as Amy knew with a certainty born of profound, enduring loss, was no longer that straightforward, if it ever truly had been. Time, relentless and utterly uncaring, had marched steadfastly on. Her heart, though still bearing the deep, indelible, aching scars of Ty's loss, had spent the recent lonely years attempting the slow, painful, and often reluctant, arduous process of mending. That mending process, that tentative, hesitant step towards a semblance of a new, albeit different future, had involved Nathan. Nathan, the kind, compassionate, and wonderfully steady veterinarian who had offered her solace when she was drowning in sorrow, unwavering support when she felt she couldn't go on, and a gentle, understanding hand to hold when she was navigating the darkest, most desolate corridors of her unending grief. He had been her quiet strength, her calm in the storm, a steadfast, reassuring presence in the unending, desolate winter of her loss. Their connection, while never ever reaching the profound, soul-deep, almost telepathic, spiritual depths of what she had shared, and now knew she still shared, with Ty, was undeniably real. It was a bond built on shared quiet moments of companionship, mutual respect and affection, and the tentative, fragile, unspoken hope of a future. A different future, certainly, than the one she had so meticulously, so joyfully planned with Ty, but a future nonetheless, one she had begun to cautiously allow herself to imagine. Now, with Ty standing before her, breathing real, tangible, the carefully constructed, fragile piece she had so painstakingly begun to find with Nathan felt like a delicate, intricately spun glass sculpture suddenly poised precariously on the very edge of a precipice, about to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. She understood with a sudden, sickening lurch in her stomach that was an unsettling mixture of profound dread and an unwelcome, yet undeniable, burgeoning relief that she owed Nathan a conversation, an impossible, heartbreaking conversation. How does one articulate the impossible? How does one find the words to tell the very man who had so patiently, so kindly helped her painstakingly piece together the shattered fragments of her broken heart that the ghost of her past, the very epicenter and soul of that heart, had miraculously returned, real and breathing, threatening to upend and dismantle everything they had so cautiously, so hopefully begun to build together? The unspoken question of Nathan or Ty, which had previously been a subtle, often unacknowledged, lingering undercurrent in her relationship with Nathan, a silent comparison of a present, tangible reality to a sacred, idealized memory, now became an immediate, terrifyingly real and agonizing dilemma. Before Ty's miraculous, world-altering return, it was about choosing between a cherished, perfect, idealized past and a tangible, comforting, if less electrifying, present. Now, it was about choosing between two living, breathing men, both of whom in their own ways she cared for. One represented a past she thought was irrevocably, painfully buried, a love she believed was eternal, foundational, and utterly irreplaceable. The other represented her courageous, difficult attempt to move on, to find new life after loss, a gentle, healing, supportive love that had undeniably helped her survive the unsurvivable. As Ty observed her intense internal struggle, the storm of conflicting emotions raging in her eyes as she looked from him, the embodiment of her deepest love, to the empty space beside her, a space that until this very moment had been symbolically, tentatively, hopefully filled by her attempts to build a new life, a new future with Nathan. He gently, with infinite understanding, rested a hand on her shoulder. His touch, so familiar, so deeply yearned for, sent an electric jolt through her, a profound warmth she hadn't fully realized she'd been so cold without for so very, very long. "You don't have to explain anything right now, Amy," he said softly, his voice laced with a remarkable patience born of his own immense, unimaginable suffering and his deep, intuitive understanding of her heart, of her turmoil. "We have time, all the time in the world now." But Amy slowly shook her head, the movement small but imbued with a sudden, sharp, painful clarity. She recognized this moment as surreal, as overwhelming, as utterly dreamlike as it felt, was one she could not evade, could not, and should not postpone. The implications were too vast, too far-reaching. The potential for further, deeper hurt, especially to Nathan, was too great. "No, Ty," she said, her voice trembling, but firm with a resolve she didn't know she possessed until that instant. There are things you need to know. Things I need to sort out, to face." "Nathan," she trailed off, the name hanging heavy, awkward, and uncomfortable in the charged air between them. A stark, unavoidable reminder of the life she had to live in his devastating absence. The thought of Nathan, of the quiet comfort and unwavering stability he represented, of the unspoken, fragile promises that had slowly, cautiously begun to form between them, crashed with monumental force against the undeniable, overwhelming reality of Ty standing before her, alive and hers again. Her world, which had so slowly, so painfully, so arduously been finding a new, fragile, tentative equilibrium, was now tilting violently, uncontrollably, dizzyingly on its axis. The choice wasn't just about who she loved more. Ty's return, his very presence, made that answer brutally, beautifully, terrifyingly clear. It was about the unavoidable collateral pain, the emotional shrapnel his return would inevitably cause, specifically and most acutely to Nathan, a good man who deserved none of this. Ty's expression tightened almost imperceptibly at the mention of another man's name spoken with such complexity by Amy. A flicker of an unreadable emotion. Was it pain, a shadow of jealousy, or simply weary understanding? Crossed his face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a determined, stoic patience. He had endured an unimaginable, hellish ordeal to return to her, to their life, to their daughter. He seemed to be steeling himself, bracing himself to face whatever awaited him now that he was finally, miraculously home. Amy, struggling for words, the sheer enormity of the situation pressing down on her, managed to choke out, He's been a friend, Ty, a very good friend. More than a friend for a while now. He helped me after I thought you were gone forever." The words were painfully, woefully inadequate. failing utterly to capture the woefully inadequate, failing utterly to capture the true complexity of her deep gratitude towards Nathan, the genuine affection and respect she held for him, and the profound, disorienting confusion that was now warring ferociously within her. Ty's return didn't just offer the breathtaking potential for a miraculous, joyous reunion. It demanded a reckoning, a painful, difficult, unavoidable choice that, in truth, her heart had already made with instantaneous, absolute certainty the very instant Ty uttered her name in the barn. The task now, the agonizing task, was to navigate the inevitable fallout, to somehow minimize the hurt to a good, kind man who deserved none of this unfolding emotional devastation. Later that same morning, the sun climbed higher in the vast Alberta sky, bathing Heartland in a bright, almost painfully clear, unforgiving light that seemed to cruelly mock the deep turmoil and confusion in Amy's heart. She knew, with a cold, sinking certainty, what she had to do, and the very thought filled her with a heavy, suffocating dread. Nathan, his familiar, reassuring presence a stark, jarring contrast to the whirlwind of powerful emotions Ty's return had unleashed within her, was engaged in a routine project with Jack Bartlett near one of the sun-drenched paddocks. They were mending a stretch of fence, their conversation easy, punctuated by the rhythmic, familiar thud of the post driver. Nathan was a comfortable, well-respected presence at Heartland, admired by Jack for his quiet competence and work ethic, genuinely liked by Lou, a man who had seamlessly, gently, almost imperceptibly woven himself into the very fabric of their lives, their family. He was, by all accounts, a genuinely good man, a man who loved her deeply and patiently. He was completely, blissfully, heartbreakingly oblivious to the emotional tempest that was brewing just a short distance away in the barn, a violent storm that was about to irrevocably, cruelly alter the entire course of his own life. Amy approached him, her steps heavy with an almost unbearable reluctance, her heart a leaden, aching weight in her chest. Each footfall on the familiar, beloved Heartland soil felt like a small, sharp betrayal of the immense kindness, the unwavering patience, the steadfast, unwavering support Nathan had so generously, so consistently shown her over the past difficult year. An unspoken, palpable tension hung in the air around her, an almost visible aura of deep distress that Nathan, perceptive in his own quiet, observant way, couldn't quite decipher but immediately, instinctively sensed as she drew near. He straightened up from his work, his tools momentarily forgotten, his gaze fixing on her with a growing, deepening concern. Nathan greeted her with his usual composed, warm demeanor, though a slight, almost imperceptible frown touched his brow as he registered her extreme pallor and the visible tremor in her hands. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." The casual, innocent, dreadful irony of his words was a sharp, unexpected pang in Amy's already aching chest. She had seen a ghost, a beloved, a cherished ghost who had miraculously and possibly returned to life. A ghost who held every single piece of her heart, past, present, and undoubtedly future. Amy hesitated, her gaze flickering towards the barn, the epicenter of her world's seismic, monumental shift, and then back to Nathan's kind, concerned, unsuspecting face. How could she possibly do this? How could she inflict such profound, devastating pain on someone who had only ever shown her unwavering goodness, gentle understanding, and selfless support? She took a seat on a nearby bale of hay, the dry straw pricking her legs, a minor, insignificant discomfort in the vast, turbulent ocean of her emotional agony. Her hands were tightly, painfully clasped in her lap, her knuckles white. Her voice, when she finally, tortuously found it, was trembling, fragile, laced with an apology that was already forming unspoken on her lips. "Nathan, there's something I need to tell you. Something I need to tell you. Something monumental. And I honestly don't know how to say it. There are no words. It's impossible." Nathan put down his tools, giving her his full, undivided attention, his brow furrowing deeper with genuine concern. His initial assumption, a perfectly reasonable one given the subtle but undeniably increasing strains that had begun to appear in their relationship over the past few months, her occasional, unexplained bouts of deep melancholy, her slight, almost imperceptible emotional withdrawals, was that this was another difficult, perhaps decisive discussion about their future together, perhaps her needing more time, or expressing deeper, more fundamental doubts about their long-term compatibility. He was ready to reassure her, to listen patiently, to pledge to do better, to be whatever she needed him to be. He loved her deeply and truly, and he was prepared to fight for their relationship, for the future he had allowed himself to hope for with her. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer that comfort, that reassurance. Amy, whatever it is, we can talk it through. You know that. If it's about us, I know things have been a bit